Hey everyone, welcome to part 22 of the Pokemon game series in Unity. So in this video we will show the Pokemon's status condition in the UI, and we will also implement volatile statuses like Confusion that will only last for the duration of the battle. Special thanks to all my Patreons for making this series possible. By becoming a Patreon, you can support me in the making of the series and get some cool rewards like access to the complete project files of the series. So let's start the video. Alright, so first let's fix some issues that we currently have. So right now, if a Pokemon has a status condition, we will still be able to set another status condition to it. But that should be possible, right? So inside our set status function, when we are trying to set a status, I'll check if status is not null. And if there is already a status, then I'll just return instead of setting the new status. Okay, so next I also want to fix a small mistake that we made in our MaxHP calculation formula. So in this formula, I also need to add the level at the end. Okay, so this mistake was something that I recently found. So next I want to show the status condition of the Pokemon in the HUD. So let me just enable my battle system. Okay, so I want to add a text in the HUD that will show the status condition of the Pokemon if it has any. So first I'm going to turn HUD into a prefab so we don't have to make changes to both the player HUD and the enemy HUD, right? So inside the game folder, we have a UI folder where we can keep the UI prefabs. So I'll just drag and drop the player HUD into the UI folder and turn it into a prefab. And I'll just rename this to HUD. Okay. So next I'll just delete the enemy HUD game object and drag our HUD prefab into the battle canvas. Okay, so let me just keep it just below the player HUD and I'll rename this to enemy HUD. Alright, so let me just change its position also. Okay, so that looks fine. And in our enemy unit game object, you can see that HUD is missing since we deleted the old game object. So let me just drag and drop our new enemy HUD into the HUD slot. Okay, so now we can add our status text into the HUD prefab. So I'll open up the HUD prefab by double clicking on it, and I'll make the HP bar a little smaller to give some space for the status text. And I'll duplicate the level text and create the status text. Okay, and let me just change its position. And I want to reduce the font size to 28. And I'll make the alignment center, both horizontally and vertically. And I'll just change the text to something like poison. Okay, let me just rearrange this. Okay, that looks okay to me. And we can also give the text any color we want. Okay, but since each status is going to have a different color, we will be setting it from the script. Alright, so let me go out of the prefab, and both our enemy HUD and player HUD should have the status text. Alright, so next let's modify our battle HUD script. So let me open the battle HUD script. And first we need a reference to the status text, right? And then I'll create a function called set status text. Okay, so inside this function, we need to check if Pokemon.status is null. So if it's null, then we can just set the status text to an empty string, right? Okay, and otherwise, we have to set the ID of the Pokemon status condition in the status text. So right now we don't have an ID inside the condition class. So if I say Pokemon.status ID, you can see we don't have a property for that. We only have name, right? And right now we only have the ID as a key in the dictionary, but we need to be able to access it from inside the condition class. So for that, inside the condition class, I'll also create a reference to the ID. Okay, and then in the conditions DB script, we can also set the ID from here, but it would be redundant and prone to mistake to set something 2 times, right? So instead, I'll create an init function inside our conditions DB to initialize everything. So this function should also be a static function, and I'll just call it init. And inside this function, I will loop through all the elements in the conditions dictionary. So remember, inside the dictionary, we have both a key and a value, and not just a value, right? So basically, we have a key value pair. So I will write it as KVP for short. And I want to loop through all the key value pairs. So in the dictionary, the key is the condition ID and value is actually the reference to the condition. So let me just store them into variables just for clarity. Okay, and we can just assign the ID inside the condition class from here. Okay, so condition ID will be automatically set for all our conditions. So we are not doing this just to show it in the HUD. It's very important to have the ID inside our condition class, because in the future we will need it in a lot of different places. So next we need to call this init function when the game starts, right? So I'll call it inside our game controller script. Okay, so inside game controller script, I also create an awake function. And in here, I'll just call conditions db dot init. Okay. So in the future, we are going to have a lot of different things inside our init function. But for now, let's just set the ID. All right, so let's go back to our battle HUD script. And now we can just say status.id to get the ID of the status condition. And since it's an enum, we need to convert it into string. And I'll also use toUpper to change it to uppercase. Okay, so we are done with our set status function, and we can just call this function to update the status in the HUD. So initially from the set data function, I'll call set status text, so that whenever we set the Pokemon's data to HUD, we will also set the status. And then we also have to set it every time the status of the Pokemon changes, right? So for that, inside the Pokemon script, I'll create an event called onStatusChanged. So I need to import the system namespace, but I can also say system.action so that we don't have to import it. Okay, so we need to call the onStatusChange function whenever a status is set or cured, right? So inside our set status function, let's call the onStatusChanged event. Okay, so let's also call it inside our cure status function. All right, so now inside our battle HUD, I will assign the status text function to the onStatusChange event of the Pokemon. Okay, so I'll say Pokemon.onStatusChange, and I'll assign our set status function. Okay, so now whenever the status is changed, this function will also be called. So next, I also want to set different colors for different statuses. So for that, I'll create a color variable for each one of the statuses. So for poison, I'll say poison color. And similarly, I'll create one for all the statuses. Okay, so we also have to change statistics.color when changing the text. So I'll actually store all these colors in a dictionary so that we can avoid lots of if-else statements. So I'll create a dictionary, and the key is going to be condition ID, and the value is going to be color, and I'll call it status colors. And let's just initialize it inside our set data function. Okay, so for poison, I'm going to assign the poison color. And similarly, we can do it for all the other statuses. Okay, so now all we have to do is, after setting the text, we'll say status text dot color equal to status colors, and for the condition ID, we'll pass Pokemon dot status dot ID. Okay, so let's go back to Unity, and let me open up the HUD prefab. And now inside the battle HUD script, we will have a color for each one of the statuses. So let me set them. Okay, so we also need to make sure that the alpha is 100, otherwise it's going to be transparent. Okay, so similarly, I'll set all the colors. Okay, so I'm done setting all the colors. So let's save it and go back out of the prefab. Okay, so let's test the game and see if it's working. All right, I have to disable my battle system. Let's test again. Okay, let me start a battle. All right, so we have a null reference error. So let's go inside our HUD prefab. And yeah, I forgot to assign the status text. So let me just drag and drop that. And this time, hopefully it should work. Okay. So if I use Thunder Wave, Bulbasaur should be paralyzed. And you can see that the status text over here changed. Okay, so let me try continuing the battle. Alright, so Bulbasaur used poison powder, and you can see that Pikachu got poisoned, right? Okay, so we are done with showing the status condition in the HUD. Alright, so next let's implement volatile statuses. So volatile statuses are statuses like Confusion that bears off once the battle is over. So in our Pokemon class, I'll also create a variable to store the volatile status. And I'll also create one to store the volatile status time. Okay, so next I need to create a function to set volatile status and cure it. Alright, so I'll just copy the set status function and change it to set volatile status. So set volatile status is going to be similar to set status, but we need to change all the status variables into volatile status. So I'll just use Control Alt and add multiple cursors and change all of them to volatile status. And we don't need to call on status changed event because volatile statuses doesn't need to be shown in the HUD. So I'll just remove that. And let me also copy cure status and create cure volatile status function. Okay, so in here I'll set volatile status to null, and I don't have to call on status change. Okay, so we have functions to set and cure volatile status. So the main difference in volatile status is that they will only last until the battle is over. So once the battle is over, we can just set it to null. So in our onBattleOver function, I'll just set volatile status to null. And next, we also need to call the events of volatile statuses in onBeforeMove and onAfterTurn. So let's do that. I'll say volatile status dot onAfterTurn. And in onBeforeMove, what I'll do is I'll create a Boolean variable called canPerformMove, and I'll set it to true by default, and I'll return that at the end of the function. So now, since we also need to run onBeforeMove on volatile statuses, we can't simply return from here. So instead, what I'll do is check if onBeforeMove returns false, and if that's the case, then I'll set canPerformMove to false. Okay, so we also need to do this for the volatile statuses. Right, so I'll just copy paste and rename the variable. Okay, so now in the onBeforeMove, if either the status or the volatile status has an onBeforeMove action, then we'll execute that, and if it returns false, then this function will also return false. So next, let's implement Confustion, which is the volatile status. So in the conditions DB, I'll add Confustion to the condition ID enum. And Confussion is going to be very similar to sleep, since it lasts for a certain number of turns and its functionality is executed inside onBeforeMove. So let's implement that. So I'll just copy paste the implementation of Confussion instead of writing it from scratch so that we can save time. Okay, so this is the implementation of Confussion. So you can see that just like with sleep, Confussion will last for a certain number of turns, and we are actually setting that from the onStart function. So one thing to note is that we are setting and modifying the volatile status time and not the status time, since Confussion is a volatile status condition. And also, once the volatile status time is over, we are curing the volatile status. So the one difference between Confussion and sleep is that when a Pokemon is asleep, it'll never be able to perform the move, right? But in case of condition, there is 50% chance that it can perform the move. So here we just create a random number between 1 and 2, and if that's equal to 1, we'll just return true, indicating the Pokemon can perform the move. And if the Pokemon wasn't able to perform the move, then it'll take a damage due to its Confusion. Right? So this part is the only difference between the Confusion and sleep status. Okay, so we have implemented a volatile status. So now let's modify moves so that they can also cause volatile statuses. So inside our move base script, right now a move can cause stat boosting and a status condition. So we also need to add a volatile status here. So I'll duplicate this and rename it to volatile status. Okay, so let me also create a property to expose it. Alright, so now in our battle system script, inside run movefx, we need to set the volatile status if it's not none. Okay, so let me just copy paste the code for the status condition and just modify it. So we need to check if volatile status is not none, and we need to call set volatile status instead. And finally, we need to pass fx.volatile status. Okay, so now if the move has a volatile status, we will set that to the Pokemon. So that's it. We are done with the implementation of volatile status conditions. But one thing I forgot to do while implementing the status conditions is that inside the init function of our Pokemon class, we need to reset all the values of the Pokemon, right? So we also need to set the status to null, and we don't have to set the volatile status because it'll automatically be set when the battle is over. But just for safety, I'll also set the volatile status to null. Okay, so now let's create a move that can cause confusion and test it out. So in my moves folder, I'll duplicate poison powder and rename it to supersonic. Okay, so let me also change the name, and I'll change the type to normal. And now inside our fx, we also have a volatile status. So supersonic should not set any status condition, so I'll change that to none. And for the volatile status condition, I'll set confusion, right? So when we use supersonic, the enemy Pokemon will be confused. Okay, so let's give supersonic to some Pokemon. I'll give it to Bulbasaur. Alright, so let's try testing the game. Okay, so I'll just use a move and wait for Bulbasaur to use supersonic. Okay, so Bulbasaur used supersonic, and you can see that Pikachu has been confused. Alright, so let me try to continue the battle. So yeah, you can see Pikachu is confused and it wasn't able to perform the move, and also it was hurt due to confusion. But our HP didn't get reduced. So that's an issue that we need to fix. So let's look inside the run move in our battle system. So yeah, here you can see that after executing on before move, we are only showing the status changes but not updating the HP. That's because until now we didn't have any statuses that could reduce the HP in on before move. So let's actually call the update HP function to do that. So after show status changes, I'll call source unit dot HUD dot update HP. Okay, so this should fix the problem. Alright, so let's test the game again. So I'll just use a move and wait for Bulbasaur to use supersonic. Okay, so Bulbasaur used supersonic, and you can see that Pikachu is confused. And from the console, we know that it will be confused for 4 moves. So yeah, let's try continuing the battle. Okay. Okay, I was able to use the move 2 times even though I was confused. So let's try again. Yeah, you can see this turn I was not able to use the move and I was hurt due to the confusion. So let's try again. So yeah, even this turn I wasn't able to do the move and was hurt due to confusion. So yeah, 4 turns are over and we should be able to kick out of the confusion in the next turn. So let's test that. So yeah, you can see Pikachu kicked out of confusion. So it's working like we expected. And yeah, Bulbasaur used supersonic again and Pikachu is again confused. Okay, so let me just finish this battle. So even though Pikachu was confused at the end of the battle, it won't be confused when you start a new battle, since we are clearing the volatile status at the end of every battle, right? So we are done with the implementation of volatile statuses. I'll stop the video here. If you think these videos are helpful, please leave a like on the video and subscribe to my channel to help it grow. So I'll see you in the next video.